Hello and welcome to New Wave Global. You are watching Unraveled with Marvi Sirmed. Tonight, we'll unravel a significant development, the recent killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh. How did Israel manage to carry out such an attack within Iran's borders? What does this incident reveal about Iran's defensive capabilities, and what might be the broader implications for the Middle East? To help us navigate these questions, we are joined by Dr. Kamran Bokhari, Director at the New Lines Institute for Strategy and Policy. Dr. Bokhari is an expert in geopolitics, international security, and especially Middle Eastern affairs. Welcome to the show, Dr. Bokhari.
Thank you for having me, Marvi.
Dr. Bokhari, in an aggressive speech, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu claimed killing Hezbollah commander Fuad Shukr in Beirut. But why do you think it hasn't yet claimed Haniyeh's assassination?
I mean, look, Israel does not always claim all operations. This is sort of, it's on a case-by-case basis. You keep the other side wondering. That's sort of the logic. And then, some things you don't want to come out and claim. I mean, they could be diplomatic repercussions for it. And so you just leave it there. There's no, I mean, the purpose of the operation was achieved. So what more can you achieve by saying, hey, we did it? That said, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did come out and obliquely claim it when he said that in the last few days, we have struck in 3 different directions. And so which 3 different directions is he talking about? So there's the long-range airstrike against the Houthis, the port of Hodeidah, which was at a distance of 1,800 kilometers from Israel. The killing of Shakur in Lebanon, in Beirut. And then, of course, Ismail Haniyeh, who was taken out in Tehran. So, I mean, there are no other incidents that one can sort of look at to. So obliquely, he said, he alluded to that, hey, we did it. But it's not surprising. I mean, Israel doesn't always claim all operations. And when it comes to operating inside Iran, you don't want, they don't come out and say we did it. I mean, I remember writing in the Wall Street Journal back in November of 2020 when their top nuclear physicist or scientist, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, was eliminated in a very complex operation. And even that was not claimed. So this isn't like one of those things that are surprising. It's just probably their operating principle.
Okay, so it might be just strategy, not any other hidden meaning. So there are multiple contradicting reports about how Mr. Haniyeh was killed. Some suggest it was a drone strike. Some say it might be a Hellfire missile strike. And the latest media report I was just reading in New York Times, it suggests that it was probably a bomb installed inside the building where Mr. Haniyeh was staying. Do you have any more credible update on that?
No, I don't. I wish I did. But I mean, let's examine each of these. It's probably worth going through all of them because we can sort of figure out what is less likely and what is more likely. I don't think this is a hellfire. I haven't seen any evidence of that, though there are some reports that a missile was fired from nearby, another building or something. And I didn't sort of find any evidence about that, though it's possible. Look, and what kind of missile? I mean, those. Nobody came up with any evidence or details as to what kind of missile are we talking about from another building nearby. There was this idea of, there was a report about the use of a quadcopter filled with ordnance that struck this apartment complex or guest house. But the most interesting part is the leaks to the New York Times. I mean, those are some very interesting tactical details, even saying that this bomb was placed in the room where Ismail Haniyeh was staying as early as 5 months before his arrival. I find that a bit hard to believe because usually in such operations, you don't sort of plan something that well in advance because A, you don't know whether the plan could change at the very last moment. So I'm not sure about that part, but having an IED placed in the room and then command detonated from somewhere else does make sense. I mean, it was the blast was sufficient to the point where it eliminated both Haniyeh and his bodyguard, his Palestinian bodyguard. But yeah, I mean, who knows what will appear in the open sources? But I find it very interesting that the IRGC is willingly providing these details to the journalists of the New York Times. Why would they do that? It makes them look really bad. What is the purpose? So, I mean, it's something that, you know, we still need to sort of sort out in terms of the intent.
Yes, it is interesting if it is if indeed it was a drone strike, or even missile strike, or you know, either of the three options. That means a deep penetration inside the Iranian security forces, or Iranian security paraphernalia, so to say, because such a strike might not be possible. I'm not a military strategist, but just a consumer of the media and media person myself, I think, and you will tell us more about it. Is it possible without a credible human intelligence available? And if that intelligence was available, what does it say about Iran's, you know, defense capabilities?
Yeah, look, I mean, that is the story, but it's not new. This isn't the first time that the Israelis have conducted such an operation inside Iran. I just mentioned the killing of Mohsen Fakhrizadeh in November of 2020. I remember writing a piece on that. And so it is a capability that the Israelis have had for some years now. And there have been other incidents attributed to the Israelis which they did not claim, including, you know, mysterious blasts at facilities thought to be nuclear sites or ballistic missile sites, and then, you know, elimination of other scientists over the years. So this isn't new, but yes, it shows a, you know, deep penetration of Iran by Israeli intelligence. I wrote a paper this morning. It was published by Geopolitical Futures, and I basically lay out how that, you know, what kind of intelligence is needed. You do need human intelligence, and you need to be able to have people on the ground operating. So let's say there was no outside intervention, and if we are to buy the New York Times story, if that proves to be the truth, and, you know, the IRGC is providing that information, regardless of their intent of why they're saying that, then what it means is that the Israelis don't need to send aircraft or fire missiles from a distance, or use drones. They have people on the ground who are doing this. They have operatives. Who are those operatives? They're obviously people who are local, because someone foreign, someone, you know, Israeli speaking Hebrew, would be easily spotted. And that's a pretty hostile environment for any foreigners. I mean, the Iranians are very suspicious about, you know, spies. They look at everybody, you know, I mean, the word in Urdu and Persian is the same, jasus. Word is thrown around a lot in Iran for people who they suspect of being agents of this intelligence service or that. Largely, they point fingers to the United States and Israel. And so it speaks volumes about how bad domestic security is. And it's not just the, you know, Israeli intelligence operating in the country. ISIS is able to operate in that country. It's a majority Shia country. ISIS should not be able to, all things being equal, not have a whole lot of room for maneuver. But we've seen in recent years, at least 2 or if not 3 attacks by ISIS, high-profile attacks, bombings, suicide bombings. So Iran, on one hand, is projecting a whole lot of power in the region, in the Arab world, supporting all sorts of militias from Iraq to Syria to Lebanon to Yemen, and has basically ingressed into the Arab world. But there's a cost. The cost is that domestically you're vulnerable. So it's it's a big embarrassment for the IRGC, and which is why they now are under pressure to somehow respond to this situation. How they do that, I have my theories, but they're still in planning phase because they don't have the similar capability or comparable capability to the Israelis. So they will have to think about this hard because they don't want it to get out of hand. That's not because they're looking bad right now. Let's say it escalates and they get hit even harder. Then they're even far worse off. Their credibility is even further undermined. So let's see how they retaliate.
Yeah. I mean, yesterday there was this whisper among the DC journalists that there are rumors that Israeli government has back channel with Iranian security authorities, and they have communicated if there is a violent response, Israel is prepared for all-out war. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm sure there are back channels. I mean, there are always back channels between, we and the Soviets had back channels back in the days of the Cold War. Back channels are always there. India has back channels with Pakistan and vice versa. So I'm not surprised about that. But, and I'm also not surprised that they would say, look, let's stop it right here. Okay. I mean, I guess if I had to speculate, the message was, we're not the ones attacking you. You're the ones asking the Houthis to fire missiles and drones at us. And you're doing the same thing via Hezbollah and through, Iraqi Shia militias, which is actually less frequency because there's a bit of a distance. And we've been attacked from, Syria as well. We're not attacking you. We're trying to neutralize Hamas. That's something we're not going to stop. But if you distract us, if you continue to make it difficult for us, then this could get really ugly. It's not in your interest and it's not in our interest. So why don't we just call it quits over here? We didn't retaliate when you fired 300 missiles and drones at us back in April. So I can see them saying that. How is that message delivered? Is it direct? Is it indirect? Is it through, some third party? Who knows? But the channels exist, and it's a way that adversaries communicate with each other. It's pretty normal.
Yeah, but what Iran is going to do with this kind of message is a big question. We are not sure how it will retaliate on the in the region or against Israel. But one is pretty sure that there will be a domestic fallout. It will be harsher. I think there are going to be more steps towards more control. What do you think?
Yeah, of course. Right now, anytime something like that happens, someone gets through the security grid, and if it happens too often, then that really rattles the host country's security establishment. How are these people getting through? Where is the leak in the system? Who's helping them? Who are the enablers? What does their network, look like? Where are they? And so they, if you will, have to seal that leak or leaks, and it's not easy. The people who are doing this at great risk to themselves because they know that they could be caught with if they make a mistake. They're in a business. If they make a mistake, they can end up dead. And so these are not amateurs. These are very professional people, and they're unlikely to leave footprints and fingerprints. At least not, but they'll try their best not to do that. So it's going to be hard. And the fact that this has been going on for many years and the Iranians have not been able to control this situation, it seems to be getting worse and worse, suggests that we're looking at a very sophisticated operation. And, I'm sure people within the regime, even within the IRGC, are saying, what is the point of having all this capability in the region and have these proxy militias when we can't control security at home? So there's going to be, there's going to be a lot of, if you will, introspection. But can they change their behavior? Can they improve their conditions? I don't think so.
Yeah. And, taking from there, if indeed it was a strike using air power, a missile or a drone might have been, it needs a place where it was shot from. And that place can be anywhere. Do you think fallout can be on the neighboring countries like Pakistan, Afghanistan, even Turkey, Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, I don't think the Turks would allow the Israelis to take action against the Iranians from their soil. Don't get me wrong, the Turks see the Iranians as a threat. They are competitors, they're rivals, and they don't like what the Iranians are doing in the Middle East because it's upsetting their interests, undermining them. Pakistan, I really doubt it. The Israelis, that's just a stretch. It requires, why would they use Pakistan? It's a dangerous place to operate in. They're already trying to hit a dangerous place. So it's too much of an indirect route. Iraq is possible. There has been talk, and I personally have never been able to find any evidence, any substantive evidence that Israeli intelligence operates in northern Iraq, in Iraqi Kurdistan, but there are reports, and the Iranians have conducted some operations in northern Iraq at suspected Mossad facilities. They've fired missiles at them. So yeah, it's technically possible, but to be honest, based on what we've seen so far over the years in terms of Israeli operations inside Iran, this seems more like there's a network in the country that are working for Israeli intelligence. That's sort of just that's my sense.
Mm-hmm. And more likely. So coming to Mr. Ismail Haniyeh, he was a key negotiator for the release of Israeli hostages. Many recent meetings have happened for this purpose. Does killing him mean Israel doesn't want an end to hostilities or even to get the hostages back alive?
Yeah, I know that that line of reasoning is making the rounds, especially in our circles. But no. Look, first of all, Hamas is a multi-layered organization in terms of leadership. So if you start from the top, there is the political bureau that is based in Qatar, in Doha.
Yeah.
And where Ismail Haniyeh, Musa Abu Marzouk, and others, and Khalid Mishal, they're all based there. So that's your sort of political leadership. That's the political bureau. That's the top leadership. Then there's a Gaza-based leadership. And Yahya Sinwar, who the Israelis are, after, who's seen as sort of the architect, the mastermind behind the October 7 attack, is the political leader of Hamas in Gaza. And so, yes, he's negotiating.
He's a hardliner compared to.
They're all hardliners to one degree or another. So yes, there are conversations that are happening, negotiations that are happening in Doha, with the Israelis, and, the Americans are involved, the Egyptians are involved, the Qataris are mediating. But at the end of the day, if you're going to get anything done, if you agree on anything, so for example, the last, earlier this year, I think it was in January, I forget the exact date, when some hostages were released. So the deal, yes, was probably done, the conversations were happening in Doha or some other place, but somehow that leadership has to get buy-in from those who are on the ground and controlling. So what the point that I'm making is that, and once again, Ismail Haniyeh wasn't sort of like, totally in charge of, we think of central leaders as having a lot of power, but the way that Hamas operates is by committee. And so there's a lot of deliberation. So if they killed one person, it's not that they're against negotiations. And they understand that. I mean, the Israelis have dealt with Hamas, going back to the late 60s. It wasn't called Hamas back then, and it was not at war with Israel at that time. It was seen as the Palestinian Muslim Brotherhood, and there was quite a bit of collaboration from 1967 when the Israelis occupied the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and from that time till 1987, when the first Intifada broke out and Hamas was actually founded as Hamas. But the predecessor organization used to be called Al-Mujamma al-Islamiyya. And that group had close working relationship with the Israeli occupation authorities. In fact, that group at that point in time was opposed to any armed resistance and would criticize Yasser Arafat's PLO for, and for being, for waging war against the state of Israel, is seeing that this is not in the interest right now of people living under the occupied territory. This was the position of these people. So the point that I'm making is Israelis know them very well. And so they know the structure, who does what. So in fact, killing one person puts pressure on the others. So that, hey, if you want to do a deal, then do it, because otherwise, we have other options. So violence is a means of gaining leverage on the bargaining table. And so I don't see this as either or, that either you want to negotiate or you go kill, someone who you were negotiating with. It goes both ways. And then, of course, how do you gain the upper hand? You have to shock the other side in order to gain the upper hand, especially given that the state of Israel has come under so much unprecedented international pressure, whether it's from the ICC, the ICJ, criticism inside the United States, which is, the closest ally of Israel. And so in a situation like that, the Israelis needed to break out of the box and regain the initiative. So they did this by killing Shukur in Beirut, by the airstrike against the Houthis, which was on the 21st, and then Haniyeh's killing. So these are ways in which you try to gain leverage. Negotiations and fighting go side by side because both spaces shape the other. For all actors, I'm just talking about Israel right now. We can make the same argument for Hamas.
So it might not be the deal breaker for the negotiations, right? Might give some leverage to Israel, but not.
It might give some leverage to Israel. Look, talks are going to be suspended, but eventually, Hamas's situation is very weak now. It's lost a person, and it's facing heavy losses in Gaza. How long can they hold out? I mean, let's just consider the fact that their leadership, most of their fighters, are in the tunnels underneath the strip. Yeah. And they run for miles and miles, as many as a couple of 100 miles. And so how long are they going to be there? They need supplies. So we're now in month 10. Well, on the 7th, we'll start month 10. It's been 9 months. So our supplies not running out. How long can they be there? A lot of people are suffering. They're not getting what they want from a negotiation, from a hostage exchange, hostages for prisoners in the Israeli jails. And if they can't show that they are somehow championing the Palestinian cause, then they risk losing even more support. I bet there's so many Palestinians in the Gaza Strip who, because of the massive devastation to their lives, I mean, we're talking close to 40,000. If these figures are accurate, because they come from the Hamas Ministry of Health, we can't be sure, but let's just assume that they're more or less accurate. Tens of thousands of people have died. That's a huge death toll. I was talking to a friend of mine from the World Bank who was working on, trying to get reconstruction and the development work, because the bank is waiting as well, and other, if you will, international institutions for a ceasefire so that they can come in and do what they do to provide relief and reconstruction. He was telling me 90% of all the infrastructure is destroyed. So how long can Hamas hold out? So I think that this is mounting pressure. I'm not saying they're going to throw in the towel tomorrow, but what I'm saying is that they seem to be weakening over time.
That's right. So there are domestic implications in Gaza. We know the rest of the figures after Mr. Haniyeh's assassination, like Sinwar you talked about, like there's Mashal and Khalil Jahia, others. They're all, I think, dead men walking, as you also said, stuck somewhere in the tunnel network within Gaza. And they might not be able to resist for far more, considering the domestic implications. Gazans might not be willing to support more, because keeping in view the Israeli hostilities and continued genocide in Gaza. So do you think the future of ceasefire, a ceasefire might be imminent?
So look, let's play this out. How do ceasefires take place? Ceasefires take place if there is an agreement on the part of both sides that, hey, we're going to end this. And there are terms that each side gets to agree from the other side. So that's sort of the model. Now, that's not happening. Why is that not happening? Is for a simple reason. The Israelis don't want a full ceasefire because their goal is to do two things. Neutralize Hamas's offensive capabilities, make sure that they cannot wage war again, and more importantly, that they cannot form the next government, that they cannot come back and still rule Gaza after everything is said and done. So they're not interested in a long-term ceasefire. But they need the hostages released. So they have to have some form of ceasefire. If you look at it from Hamas's point of view, their imperatives and constraints, it has leverage right now because of those hostages. And then there's the question is, how long can they hold those hostages? Not indefinitely. You need resources, basic food, water, and, other supplies that, keep people going for an extended period of time. We all need them. And so they have leverage, but if they're not going to get a full ceasefire, then they give up those hostages. And then the Israelis come back and do an operation, then, they're at a disadvantage military, in terms of not just leverage, but the ability to hold out. And so this is a very difficult situation. So what is likely to happen is that at some point there's going to be exhaustion, and and they're going to have to say, okay, yes. So they will agree to something, but let's assume that this normal hostage for prisoners and ceasefire deal does not take place. Let's say the Israelis gain intelligence about the whereabouts of their leaders, their key leaders, where they are, and they somehow are able to go and kill them. and like they've killed Haniyeh and like they've been killing Hamas leaders, Hezbollah leaders, then that's a pretty big blow to Hamas as an organization. So you can't get every fighter, but if your leadership has been hit, then that's very demoralizing for the group. Then there'll be plenty of people who'd surrender, and they would negotiate for surrender. And depending on how much leverage they have, they will, they'll be able to get a deal of some sort. But I mean, I'm hypothesizing, I'm speculating here.
Yeah.
So that is how I look at a ceasefire. Those are sort of some of the conditions in which a ceasefire could manifest itself.
Okay. But how does, these hostages, talking about the hostages, they have the families back in Israel, and there are Israeli people as well, and Netanyahu is not in a very strong position. Some even say that the ceasefire will be the political death of Netanyahu. So how has this attack, assassination of Mr. Haniyeh, has played out in Israel domestically?
So look, we know, through polls that the prime minister is deeply unpopular, and not just because of the way he's prosecuted the war in Gaza, more so because of the composition of his government. Far right extremists are part of his government. I'm talking about right-wing Jewish extremists. And so a lot of Israelis, are opposed to that. On top of that, before October 7th, and for a year, if not more, Israelis were protesting against the government because of its efforts to weaken democracy in the country by strangling or trying to subordinate the Supreme Court, essentially the judiciary, to the executive branch. So he's unpopular. But at the same time, there is this fear, trauma that we hear among Israeli people related to October 7th. So it's a very difficult situation for most Israelis. They want the hostages released. They blame him for this whole situation. But at the same time, do they want, how do you get him out? And how does that work with the security? So when you're at war, do you change governments? When you're dealing war on multiple fronts, then do you change governments? Well, you don't. So that sort of weakens sort of that impetus on the part of the Israelis to say, well, this guy has to go. Eventually he will go, but until now, until the airstrike on the Houthis, until the killing of the Hezbollah military commander and Haniyeh, he was looking, he was under a lot of pressure. Through these operations, he's basically trying to, if you will, get out from underneath some of that pressure and say, okay, people look at it and say, okay, at least he's protecting us and he's done this. So it doesn't win him a lot of support, but it sort of kicks the can down the road where, his fall from power gets delayed. And so it buys him time. I'm not sure if buying time will eventually solve his problems. I doubt it. But at some point, as long as there's a conflict going on, to go back to your point, he's in office. And it's not just he's in office. Once he's out of office, there's a good chance that he could be, facing jail time. Wow. And so looking at it from his imperative, his first order of business is, I don't want to go to jail. I want to stay in power. And, whatever can enable that, he will pursue it. But he's not completely free because he's got an opposition. He's got divisions within his cabinet. He has Israeli society is deeply divided. So he's navigating these things. He's very skillful. Look, I mean, he's now the longest serving prime minister. I mean, you don't get to be, where he is by just being stupid or reckless. I mean, those are sort of extreme ways of looking at politicians. People have this, in popular parlance, politician we don't like, we'll say, oh, that person is stupid, or some such words. But in reality, I mean, these people are very sharp and cunning and skillful. They have to be, otherwise they can't do their job and survive in that sort of milieu of politics.
That's right. So coming back to the USA now, well, USA and UK are the most powerful countries that have designated Hamas as terrorist organization. UN hasn't. UN categorizes it as armed resistance group. And plus, over the past few years, looking at President Trump's policies and then President Biden's policies, there's a little, absolutely actually no hope that US will distance itself from Israel or the alleged war crimes perpetrated by Israel in Gaza. Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Trump both of them have not given any indication that they want to distance from whatever is going on. What do you see the future US policy, future in terms of right now and after the new administration comes in?
Look, I think the expectation that somehow the United States and Britain are going to distance themselves from Israel, I think that expectation is misplaced, not because of any ideological reason. It's very much geopolitical interest. If you're the United States and the Middle East is a mess, and you have four powers there, and there's an imbalance of power. So who are the four powers in the Middle East? Turkey, Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia. Yeah. Saudi Arabia, as you know, is dependent on the US for its own security. So, and they're a non-player. Everybody knows that, and so that immediately creates an imbalance. If you look at Turkey, it has its own problems domestically. And then on top of that, Iran has Turkey blocked strategically because Iran dominates Iraq and Syria, the two Arab states that are on the borders of Turkey. So Turkey doesn't have that kind of influence that Iran does. So if the Arab world consists of states that have collapsed or are inert, again, geopolitically speaking, then it's a two-player game. I mean, the weakening of the Arab world, the weakening of the Arab world over this many decades, I mean, it was inevitable in many ways. What we see today is that clash between Iran and Israel. So Iran has always acted by proxy, but now what it's finding out is that strategy has run its course. It now has to get directly involved because the situation has come to a point. So heavy Iranian influence in along the borders with Israel, in countries along the borders with Israel, Syria, Lebanon, Gaza. And so the Iranians are trying through Iraq to have their influence in Jordan. They haven't succeeded yet. That would add more pressure should that happen. But even with the current scenario, you have two players. So now your ally is Israel and your opponent is Iran. If your ally has done things that are making you look bad, and it's not ready, it is not behaving the way you want it, but you don't dump the ally and you don't put too much pressure on it because it sends a message to the region that the United States and the West has abandoned Israel, then it's open season. That would embolden Iran. That would embolden all of Iran's allies. That would send a message to Saudi Arabia and UAE that they're in trouble too. So if the US can step away from Israel, then then what are their chances of continued U.S. support? They're already worried that the U.S. Bandwidth globally being stretched, and with the need to focus on Ukraine, the need to focus on China, and dozens of other problems, and the domestic issues inside the United States, that the U.S. can't support them anymore. They're really, really worried already. On top of that, if any administration, Trump or a future Trump, future Kamala Harris administration, if they do that, then you are basically plunging the region. It's in a frying pan right now. You're going to throw it into the fire, because it sets into motion cataclysmic dynamics that could really exacerbate. If you think that region is on fire right now, well, as they say in the South, you ain't seen nothing yet. So these are constraints on the United States that force it to stay there. This is just a strategic reality. It has nothing to do with ideology. Yes, there's ideology there. There may be, and then, there's nobody to balance it with, as I said earlier. So if so who are the belligerents? I mean, the poor Palestinian people are stuck in between Israel and Hamas. So if they're fighting, who does the U.S. support? You got to support your ally, or at least you can't abandon your ally. You have to show some level of support. Yes, you can tweak it, you can calibrate it, but imagine if Biden had tried to sort of say that, then his political opponents would say, oh, you have abandoned the bedrock policy of the United States that was, every administration had since 1967. And that would cost Biden politically. If we don't expect President Trump to say it because of where he is ideologically, or where his party is ideologically, but let's say Kamala Harris comes out and she says, people say, hey, what are you doing for the Palestinians? And that's how you're going to get my vote. And then if she comes under pressure and she says something, she has to do carefully navigate around that problem, because the Republicans will attack her, and she could risk losing the election or weakening her political position. And if I had to sort of bet that in the future, there has to be a deal. Let's say it's a Trump administration, the Trump-Vance administration, come January 2025, and they need to do a deal. They will have to compromise in some shape or form, and then they're going to get attacked by their own base. So this is a very, very difficult situation. You already have seen criticism of Benjamin Netanyahu from former President Trump. Now, why is he doing that? Because he realizes that it is quite likely, there's a good chance he's going to be president, and this problem is going to be his. So people will, and he will have to solve it. And at that point in time, whatever your voters think, whatever your ideology is, you have to set it aside, and you have to be pragmatic. President Trump fired John Bolton, his own national security advisor, openly saying that if it was up to John, we'd be at war with Iran. I don't want to be at war with Iran. Despite the fact that it was Trump who gave the order to eliminate Qasem Soleimani, the head of the IRGC-QF. So these are complicated. You can't disentangle politics from geopolitics.
That's right. That's a very pragmatic yet objective view at the situation. Thank you very much, Dr. Bokhari, for sharing your insights and helping us unravel these, complex circumstances. As we continue to monitor the developments in the Middle East, it's clear that the repercussions of Ismail Haniyeh's killing will be felt for some time. To our viewers, thank you for joining us tonight on Unraveled with Marvi Sirmed. If you found this discussion valuable, please subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with your network. New Wave Global is an independent media platform that relies heavily on your subscriptions rather than advertisements to bring you in-depth and unbiased coverage. Stay informed, stay engaged, and join us next time as we unravel more pressing global issues. Good night.